The message came through just before noon. Dinner tonight. Just us. 7 p.m. I made a reservation. It was from my son. I stared at it for a long moment, unsure whether to be moved or suspicious. We hadn't shared a meal, just the two of us, in years. Birthdays, holidays, and formal occasions, sure, but never something this intentional. I replied with a simple sure, and spent the rest of the afternoon in a strange daze, part hope, part confusion. Maybe this was a turning point. Maybe he wanted to talk, to reconnect. Maybe all the silent gaps between us were about to be filled with something real. The restaurant was quiet and elegant. Dim lighting, white tablecloths, polished silverware. A place for conversations that matter. He was already seated when I arrived, scrolling through his phone. He stood to greet me with a polite nod, but not a hug. "You look well," he said, sitting again almost immediately. "So do you," I replied, though he didn't look at me when he smiled. The waiter came. We ordered. Small talk followed. Weather, traffic, something about a recent news headline. It all felt rehearsed. His eyes kept drifting toward the entrance, like he was expecting someone, or waiting for something. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe I was just too eager for this to mean something. Still, a chill settled in the back of my mind. Not from the air, but from the silence that followed his every word. He was polite. He was present. But he wasn't really there. I told myself to be patient, to not read into every glance, every pause. Relationships take time to rebuild. Maybe this was just the first brick. And so, I stayed. I sat across from my son, the boy I once carried on my shoulders, now a man I barely recognized, and tried to believe this dinner was the start of something good. But deep down, something didn't feel right. We talked, or at least, we tried. The conversation danced awkwardly around anything meaningful, like two strangers stuck in a waiting room. My son asked about my health in the same tone one might use when inquiring about the weather. I answered, trying to sound casual, but each word felt like it echoed too loudly in the space between us. He told me about his work, not with excitement, but like reading a resume aloud. Promotions, new clients, travel plans. I nodded, asked questions, smiled in all the right places, but none of it felt real. "I saw you planted tomatoes again this year," he said, sipping his wine. I raised a brow. "Yeah, thought you hated tomatoes." "I do," he replied, glancing at his phone again. "Just remembered from Mom's garden." There it was, her name, dropped like a pebble in water. No emotion, just memory. We both felt it, but neither of us touched it. It was easier that way. I tried steering things toward warmth. "Remember when we used to come here when you were little?" I offered gently. "You'd always ask for 2 desserts, and the waitress would pretend to argue." A faint smile tugged at his lips, but he looked away. "I was a kid then," he said. "Yes," I said. "You were." Another silence stretched between us. He checked his phone again, screen briefly lighting up his face with cold blue light. I noticed how his eyes flicked across the screen, then quickly away, as if he was waiting for something or someone. "You expecting a call?" I asked lightly. "No, just work stuff." But the tension in his shoulders said otherwise. I leaned back in my chair and sipped my water, letting the silence return. Something was wrong. I could feel it, not in what was said, but in what wasn't. In the formal tone, the lack of warmth, the avoidance of eye contact, the way he flinched at every vibration in his pocket. This wasn't just an awkward dinner. It was a conversation weighed down by something unspoken. And I was starting to wonder if he had invited me for more than just a meal. Midway through the meal, just as I was cutting into my chicken, I felt a buzz in my jacket pocket. At first, I thought it was just a reminder or one of those automated appointment texts. But something about the timing made me pause. I set my fork down and reached casually for my phone, angling the screen beneath the table so my son wouldn't notice. The message was from an unknown number. 5 words. No punctuation. No name. "Stand up quietly. Don't say anything to him. Leave now." My heart skipped. I stared at the screen, rereading it as if the words might rearrange themselves into something less alarming. But they didn't. I looked up. My son was sipping wine, scrolling through his own phone, completely calm. The restaurant around us was quiet, cozy. Soft jazz played from a corner speaker. A couple laughed quietly 2 tables away. Nothing was out of place. And yet, everything felt wrong. I read the message again. Leave now? Why? Who sent this? What was I supposed to be running from? Or who? I looked around the room, subtly scanning the faces. No one seemed to be watching me. No one out of place. No movement from the staff. No sign of danger. But the warning kept echoing in my head. I glanced at my son. He looked relaxed on the surface, but his eyes kept darting to the time on his phone. He wasn't making conversation anymore. He wasn't even pretending to be invested in this dinner. I debated. Should I ask him directly? Show him the message? But something told me not to. Something in my gut, an old instinct I hadn't felt since my younger days, whispered that this wasn't a joke or a prank. It was serious, and showing him would be the worst thing I could do. I looked down at the text once more, my thumb hovering over the screen. Stand up quietly. Don't say anything. Leave. Whoever sent it, they knew something I didn't. And for some reason, they were trying to protect me. I took a breath, steadied my hands, and made a decision. I would listen. I placed my napkin gently on the table, trying not to show the tremor in my hands. I'm going to the restroom, I said calmly. My son didn't look up, just gave a slight nod, his eyes fixed on his phone. I stood slowly, each movement deliberate, rehearsed in my head. I took my phone, left my jacket behind to avoid suspicion, and walked toward the rear hallway. But at the last second, I veered right, toward the exit. The cool night air hit my face like a splash of truth. My pulse thudded in my ears. I didn't run, but every step away from that restaurant felt like an escape. I kept walking until I was out of view from the windows, then pulled out my phone and typed, "Who are you?" 3 seconds passed. Then the screen lit up again. "Check your email." I stopped under a dim streetlight and opened my inbox. Sure enough, a new message. No subject, no sender name. Just an attachment. My thumb hovered over it, hesitant, then tapped. Even before it finished loading, I knew. This wasn't just a warning. It was an opening. A door into something bigger, darker, and far more personal than I could have imagined. I had walked away from dinner thinking I was leaving confusion behind. But now, the real story was only beginning. Back home, I sat in the stillness of my study, the soft ticking of the clock louder than it had ever been. I opened my laptop with a hesitation I couldn't shake. The glow of the screen illuminated my hands, still trembling from the weight of what I had walked away from. The email was waiting. No subject, no sender name, just one line in the body. "You need to see this before it's too late." Attached were 4 files. I opened the first, a series of grainy surveillance photos. My son, sitting across from a man in a gray suit at what looked like a lawyer's office. His expression was calm, even smug. The timestamp was just 3 weeks ago. The second file, a scanned document. Legal paperwork, with my full name across the top. My heart froze as I read the words. Petition for declaration of incapacity. He was trying to have me declared mentally unfit. The third file detailed a draft granting him full power of attorney, transferring control of my accounts, estate, and medical decisions. It was all there. Pages of betrayal dressed as concern. The final document hit the hardest. A scheduled court appointment, already filed. Tonight, 9:30 p.m., just after our dinner. My throat tightened. So this was the reason for the invitation. Not to reconnect, not to rebuild trust, but to soften me up, to play polite while he plotted my erasure from my own life. He hadn't come for a meal. He had come for the rest of me. My retirement account, my house, my name. Everything I had spent a lifetime building was already being stripped from me, one paper at a time, hidden behind his well-cut suit and tight smile. And if I hadn't left that restaurant, if I hadn't listened to the message, by midnight, I would have been nothing more than a signature on a page, a burden to be managed, a man quietly removed from his own legacy. But now I knew, and I wasn't about to let him finish the job. I leaned back in my chair, the laptop screen still glowing with the evidence of betrayal. My eyes burned, not just from staring too long, but from memory. I had raised him alone. His mother left when he was barely 5, said she wasn't cut out for motherhood, and just vanished. So I did it all. The packed lunches, the late-night fevers, the school events where I was the only dad in a sea of moms. I worked double shifts, skipped vacations, and poured every ounce of strength I had into building a life he wouldn't have to fight so hard for. And for a while, it worked. Well, I thought it did. He was a quiet kid, smart, observant. People used to say he was mature for his age. I thought it was a compliment. Now I realize it was a warning. There were moments over the years, small cracks I'd painted over, like the time he changed my banking password by accident, or when he offered to help with my paperwork, but insisted on handling it alone, or the way he always framed his concern as control. Dad, you don't need to worry about these things. I've got it. It's too complicated. Let me handle it. Back then, I told myself it was just love. A son trying to take care of his aging father. I wanted to believe that, needed to believe that, because the alternative, that the boy I raised, the one I protected at every turn, was slowly positioning himself to take everything from me. That was too painful to face. But tonight, the fog cleared. This betrayal wasn't sudden. It didn't happen over dinner. It didn't start with a court document. It started with trust, and it grew quietly, like mold in a wall, hidden, spreading behind kind smiles and gentle tones. I had given him everything, and piece by piece, over years, he had learned how to take more. Not through violence, but through calculation. And now that I saw it all clearly, the question wasn't whether I would fight back. It was whether I was already too late. The phone rang just as I was about to close my laptop. No caller ID. Unknown number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. But tonight wasn't normal, and something told me to answer. Hello. I said, voice cautious. A woman replied, soft but steady. Mr. Dalton. Yes. I'm sorry to call so late. I'm the one who sent the message. And the documents. There was a pause. I stayed silent, waiting. I'm not supposed to be contacting you, she continued. I work, or used to work, for your son's attorney. I'm a paralegal. Her voice tightened, like she was trying to breathe through nerves. I came across the file last week. At first, I thought it was just a regular guardianship case. But the more I read, the more it felt wrong. I swallowed. So you leaked it? Yes, quietly. I used a dummy email. Wiped everything. I could lose my license. But I couldn't sit back and let this happen. I've seen too many families weaponize the system against their own. She paused again, then added, you have legal rights. But time matters. He's planning to file for emergency control if you don't respond. What do? I asked. I have a name. A lawyer I trust. She's fast, discreet, and she knows how to fight this. I'll send you her contact tonight. I closed my eyes, breathed in slowly. Thank you, I whispered. I'm just sorry I didn't see it sooner, she said. The line went quiet, but the weight of her words stayed. In a world that nearly let my own son erase me, a stranger had risked everything just to warn me. And now, with her help, I had a fighting chance. But the clock was ticking. I didn't sleep that night. By 11:30 p.m., I was out the door again, coat thrown over my shoulders, documents in hand. The city lights blurred as I drove, not from rain, but from the storm building inside me. If my son had spent years preparing this trap, I had no time to waste dismantling it. The bank manager knew me well. I'd opened my first account there 40 years ago. When I walked in, disheveled and breathless, he looked concerned. Mr. Dalton, everything all right? No, I said flatly. I need to freeze all joint access immediately and flag any power of attorney requests filed in my name. He asked no questions, just nodded and went to work. By the time I left, the access was revoked. My son wouldn't get a single cent. Not now. I called my old friend Margaret, a retired attorney I trusted more than anyone. Something's happening, I told her, and I need to protect everything. By 2 a.m., she had emailed a new will draft and updated medical clauses. One in particular stood out, and she pushed for it. No financial or medical decisions can be made on my behalf without an independent psychological evaluation from two court-approved doctors. That clause alone could stop any emergency filing in its tracks. At home, I pulled out the dusty box of security cameras I'd bought after a neighbor's break-in but never installed. Tonight, they went up. Front door, back porch, hallways. Motion alerts on my phone. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was protection. I walked through my house, not just as a father, but as a man preparing for battle. No shouting, no weapons, just proof. Paper, power reclaimed. He wanted control of my life. Instead, he would face the one version of me he never expected. Prepared, calm, and quietly locked down. The phone rang just after noon the next day. My son's name lit up the screen. I let it ring twice before answering, keeping my voice even. Hello. Hey, Dad, he said, cheerful, too cheerful. You okay? I'm fine. There was a pause, then a soft laugh. You kind of disappeared last night. 1 minute you were there, next minute you were gone. Everything all right? His tone was light, casual, but there was something behind it, like someone tapping the surface of a frozen lake, checking for cracks. I just needed some air, I said simply. Another pause. Longer this time. Did something happen? He asked, voice dipping just slightly. Did you? Here's something. I leaned back in my chair and looked out the window. The sky was gray, but still, nothing moved. No, I replied, just needed space. He hesitated. I was worried, you know. You looked a little off. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because of the irony. He was testing me, fishing for signs, trying to figure out whether I knew. I'm all right, I said again, then let the silence hang. He waited for me to fill it, to ask something, say something, give something away. I didn't. I let the quiet stretch, unbroken. Well, he said eventually, voice tightening just a bit. Maybe we can try again sometime. I really wanted last night to go well. Maybe, I replied. We'll see. We said our goodbyes. He hung up first. I sat there, phone still in hand, not moving. He was suspicious now, but he didn't know how much I knew, and I wasn't going to show my hand early. He had played this game in whispers and shadows. Now, I was learning to fight the same way, not with accusations or anger, but with silence, the kind that makes even the guilty wonder what you might already know. By the end of the week, I wasn't just reacting, I was building. Margaret, my lawyer friend, worked swiftly with the documents I had received. The whistleblower, Sarah, the paralegal, continued feeding us what she could from shadows. Together, we moved like a quiet storm, invisible to anyone not paying close attention. First, we filed a temporary restraining clause on all my assets. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It didn't alert banks or cause a scene. But it created a legal freeze, a protective shell around everything I owned. Real estate, investments, medical directives, even the small pension accounts I hadn't touched in years. My son could no longer request, sign, or transfer anything without triggering legal alerts. Then came the big one. My existing power of attorney paperwork, the ones he thought he'd slip into the court system without me noticing, were voided and replaced. Margaret filed a complete revocation, quietly executed and signed in the presence of two trusted witnesses. His name was erased from every legal line. Just like that. The keys he thought were already in his hand were gone. But I wasn't finished. I hired a private investigator, someone Margaret had worked with before. Discreet, efficient, unrelenting. Over the next few days, he began collecting a timeline, meetings, emails, witness statements, even footage of my son meeting with a K facility that specialized in handling dependent seniors. He had already been planning the next stage, full placement, quietly removing me from my home under the guise of protection. The betrayal was deeper than I realized. But now, I had everything. The papers, the audio logs, the footage, every piece laid carefully into place like a chessboard finally turning in my favor. I wasn't preparing revenge. That would require fury. This wasn't rage. It was justice, built brick by brick, silently and thoroughly. Because when someone tries to rewrite your life without your consent, you don't just shout. You rebuild the truth and make sure the next time they try to lie, the facts are louder than their intentions. And soon, very soon, he would see what quiet truth really looked like. I invited him over for coffee on a Sunday afternoon, the same way he had invited me to dinner just a week before. Nothing formal, no warnings, just a calm text that read, "Come by if you're free. Would love to catch up." He arrived 15 minutes early, as always, freshly shaved, shirt tucked, eyes sharp, confident, polished, maybe even smug. He stepped inside, smiling politely. "Smells like you've been baking," he said, looking around. "You didn't have to go all out." I gestured toward the kitchen table. "Coffee's fresh. Sit." He walked in, still unaware. On the table sat a neat stack of papers, each one carefully chosen. A timeline, a thread, printouts of the email, the surveillance photos, the court documents he never thought I'd see. Everything laid bare. He paused when he saw it. His expression flickered just for a second. Confusion gave way to recognition. Then fear, then denial. "What is this?" he asked, voice lower now. I didn't answer his question. Instead, I looked him in the eye and said quietly, "I was never the fool you hoped I'd be." He didn't speak. His eyes darted across the pages, taking in every bit of the evidence. There were no raised voices, no lectures, just silence and consequences. He looked at me again, no longer smug, no longer rehearsed. "Dad," he started. I raised a hand gently. "You don't need to explain." The moment stretched, heavy and cold. He stood there, surrounded by the truth he'd spent years hiding behind smiles and fake concern. There was nothing left to manipulate. I poured myself a cup of coffee and took a slow sip. He didn't sit. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just stood there, silent, because he knew it was over. And that this time, the man he once thought he could quietly erase had quietly erased him from the equation. No shouting, no fight, just a table of proof, and a father who finally stopped pretending not to see. The next morning, I visited the notary's office alone. Everything had already been prepared. Margaret had finalized the documents over the weekend. Airtight, irrevocable, clear. My estate, my home, my savings. Every asset I had spent a lifetime building was to be transferred to a foundation for underprivileged children, a scholarship program in my late wife's name. The only condition, that the funds be used for education, mentorship, and dignity for those who never had a parent to stand by them. My son's name did not appear anywhere. No inheritance, no second chance, no legal thread tying him to what he tried to steal. I didn't do it out of spite. I did it out of clarity. Later that evening, I wrote a letter, not for lawyers, not for court, but for him. I placed it in a sealed envelope and left it in the box of family albums he never bothered to open. "Love doesn't mean blindness," I wrote. "It means seeing someone fully and choosing them anyway. You had that. 4 years, and you traded it for control. I won't carry anger, but I won't carry you anymore either. This isn't revenge. It's release. Goodbye." Some endings don't need a door to be slammed. Just a lock quietly turned and walked away from. The seasons turned without drama. Autumn gave way to winter, and then to a slow, quiet spring. The mornings were quieter now, not empty, just still. The kind of stillness that comes after surviving something heavy. The kind of peace that isn't loud, but earned. I spent more time in the garden. Started volunteering at the local library, reading to kids who didn't yet know what betrayal felt like. And I smiled more, not because everything was perfect, but because I had survived what almost wasn't. I wasn't naive anymore, but I wasn't bitter either. Then, one quiet afternoon, as sunlight streamed through my living room window, my phone buzzed. A message. "He tried, but you stopped him. You still have your name." It was from Sarah, the paralegal, the woman who risked everything for someone she didn't even know. I read the message twice, then set the phone down and looked out the window. My name, not just legally, not just on documents, but the truth of who I was, the father, the builder, The man who didn't let silence make him smaller. I sipped my tea, breathing in the quiet, and let a small, content smile settle on my face. There were no battles left to fight, because sometimes protecting yourself doesn't look like war. It looks like quietly walking away before they think you can.